At the 1972 Academy Awards, the Best Picture nominations included Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, Peter Bogdanovich's The Last Picture Show, and the offbeat crime thriller The French Connection, which lent a European edge to a classic American narrative, and whose Best Picture victory was seen as confirming the arrival of the so-called New Hollywood. William Friedkin was hailed as a wunderkind, and inaccurately but appropriately declared to be the youngest filmmaker ever to win the Best Director Oscar. But Friedkin's glamorous triumph had its roots in a more down-to-earth victory, achieved 10 years earlier by two New York policemen, Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso, who had laughingly imagined themselves to be movie stars as they pulled off one of the biggest drug busts in American history. Sonny and Eddie, nicknamed Cloudy and Popeye, were working out of this, the first precinct, when in January 1962 they arrested Pasquale Patsy Fuca and 5 others on drug trafficking charges. That case, begun the previous October when the two off-duty detectives had spotted Patsy at the Copacabana nightclub, formed the basis of The French Connection, with events and characters being fictionalized in Friedkin's film.
We had made a bunch of arrests that day and spent the whole day in court, and then went back up to the office to do paperwork, and then Eddie wanted to stop in the Copacabana. So we went up there, and we're sitting around looking at a bunch of people at a table spending a lot of money. And I recognized a lot of those people being dope pushers up in Harlem. And Patsy Fuca was the individual in this dope empire who had taken over the responsible duties, and so we followed him to a luncheonette where he parked his car. We watched that place for a while, and we saw some of these guys that were in the Copacabana coming with attaché cases into this luncheonette in Brooklyn. And what that was people coming with money for the next shipment of drugs. And then we requested permission to do a wiretap. And at first they didn't want to give it to us. And then instead of giving it to us for 60 days, they finally gave it to us for 30 days. And before the 30-day period was over, a call came in from Europe with a French accent, looking to meet Patsy.
Will I expect you?
Yeah, what time?
12 o'clock, yes?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
A very famous French television personality whose real name was Jacques Engelvan was put up by a man called Jean Jahan, who was a Corsican with big drug connections in France and elsewhere. Jahan persuaded Engelvan, who was coming to America to do some kind of documentary for his television show, to bring over this car that had loaded in the rocker panels of the car $15 million worth of street value heroin.
We followed them down to Pier 46, didn't know what they were doing. We stood in 19-degree weather while the ship was unloaded. What they were really watching is the car with the drugs in it coming off the ship, but we had no idea what they were watching. And that's the first time we saw that car. And little by little, from following these people all over the place, we started piecing this together, and ultimately wound up making what they call now the largest seizure of heroin ever in the history of any municipal police department.
A few of the lesser players got very little jail time. The major players all got off and went back to France and lived happily ever after.
Jean Jahan disappeared, and we kept the outstanding warrants for him, and we had different tips that he was spotted all over Europe, but we never found him.
There were at one time over 50 law enforcement officers watching Jean Jahan, and he got out.
Obviously, it really was a wake-up call as to just how much drugs was coming into the United States and how much money was involved.
We found out that this operation had been smuggling 50 kilos every 6 weeks for 25 years.
It turned out to be the largest drug seizure that had ever been made. It had international ramifications. It weighed about 64 pounds. It could have been stepped on 7 or 8 times. In street parlance, that means that by the time it was sold, nickel and dime bags, it probably was worth about $220 million, all in one seizure. Eddie and Sonny broke that case, put it together. They made that case. It was inevitable that if that case was going to be made, it would be made by these two.
I thought they were hilarious. And I thought that their approach to law enforcement was just the absolute right touch for the time. It was like a game to them.
Sonny and Eddie really understood the streets. They understood the drug world. They worked together very, very well. There was no such thing as ever going home with those two guys. They lived and breathed the case.
Eddie was, this very loquacious, extroverted Irishman who had a lot to say about everything.
At one time, he supposedly had the most felony arrest in the New York Police Department. So he was, in many ways, a very good cop. But he was, he was difficult to get along with.
I don't know who Egan was. I don't know anything about him, and I didn't hang out with him, and I didn't like him. He wasn't the kind of man that one got close with, I don't think.
He was obsessive with being a detective. There was a time, I'll give you an example, there was a time when we were doing the cat and mouse chase down in the subway with the Frenchman and Hackman jumping back and forth on and off the subway train. And I was standing with Eddie, and a guy came walking along dressed just like the Frenchman. And Eddie looked, and he's looking at this guy, and I said, what's going on? He says, that guy's dirty. Just like that. And he said, I'm going to find out. And he took off, and he followed him. He got on his train, he left, he came back a few hours later. And he said, yep, he was dirty. He says, I was right. So he never stopped being a cop.
He was the bravest guy I ever met in my life. He had no concerns going out making arrests.
Outgoing, loud, gregarious, a great partner.
Somewhat egocentric, obviously the boss of that squad.
But you always knew there was, a couple of things that weren't all there. And Sonny was a solid guy. So they probably counted one another beautifully.
I think Sonny was the safety valve, who always said to Eddie, Eddie, that's enough. Can't go that far. And I think they both had a sort of an understanding between each other.
Yeah, well, when you worked with Eddie, who always thought everything was half full, you had to look the other way. So I was the guy who always had to worry about things.
Sonny always saw the glass half empty. Sonny always, it was never partly sunny, it was always partly cloudy.
My name was Sonny, so Eddie used to break my chops and call me the opposite of Sonny, which was cloudy. That's where that came from.
Popeye! What? Me, Cloudy, open the door.
Eddie got the name of Popeye because when he wasn't working, we were Popeyeing around to this bar, this watering hole, that particular place, constantly.
What do you say we Popeye down the shade for a half hour so I'll have a couple drinks? For Christ's sakes, I'm beat. I'm going to go. All right. One drink.
It was a way we used to tease him about his running around in different places where he thought young girls would congregate,
Well, you want to play hide the salami with his old lady?
Yeah.
Of all the people I met in this world, he was there for you. He was on your side. He is undaunted by anything. Fear did not come into the picture with him.
Egan and Grosso's exploits were first written up by Robin Moore, whose book was optioned by producer Phil D'Antoni. But when D'Antoni brought Moore's book to Friedkin, he gave it no more than a cursory glance before deciding that if he was going to take this project on, he needed to get back to the primary source material, to go out on patrol with Egan and Grosso.
I wasn't aware of it until Phil D'Antoni, who was a a friend of mine in California came to me in the steam room at Paramount and said, I got this project and I think you'd be great for it with your documentary background and stuff. And he told me a little bit about the story, and the picture was not set up at any studio, but he invited me to come to New York with him to meet Egan and Grasso. And then they told me about the case, and I thought, yeah, this would make a great movie.
The basic story was the book. Two guys who followed this case to its end and pulled off almost a miracle, that they actually survived and still came through in the end.
I think what really interested Billy, and it was the two characters who were kind of opposites to each other. And I think he found something in those two characters that he could transpose to a screen and have people interested in seeing them.
I couldn't read the book. I only knew from the dust jacket what it was about. But I had no idea what the hell it was about. It was, you know, very thick. I don't mean thick like this, I mean rather thick-headed.
I find it almost injurious to my health to say that Billy was not telling the truth. But I find it incredible that he didn't read the book.
I've never read Robin Moore's book. I tried to. I don't know how many pages I got through, not many. I couldn't read it. I couldn't follow it.
He may call skimming, not reading, you know, but I think the interest that was derived from that book is what sparked Billy. And I think Billy has a great habit of finding a property he loves and then going about changing it, you know.
The case is pretty well stated in the book, but it's not dramatically stated. So in the change from the novel to the drama, you needed dialogue to tell the story, and action to tell the story.
Well, I was very interested in how cops worked, and the only way to really know that is to be with them and to step into their shoes.
That's the way Billy is. He's a stickler for that credibility and the specifics, and what he finds interesting, he'll inject it right into a script.
He had a knowledge of the street that, you know, you don't find with many people outside of people from the street or, you know, cops.
I remember the first time we took Billy to a shooting gallery. You know, a shooting gallery is, we call that where people who use drugs go to shoot up. And Billy lived in the 90s on Fifth Avenue. And we took him to a shooting gallery on 110th Street and Fifth Avenue.
Eddie or Sonny would pick me up on the street. We'd go out, an 8-minute drive up to 135th Street, and suddenly we were plunged into a world of darkness.
So when we kicked this door in this abandoned building and found about 15, 20 people in all kinds of disarray and with needles in their arms and tubing around and belts around their arms, and Billy was like amazed.
There were apartment buildings just rife with them, and I guess they wanted to show me what the world was like.
And he kept saying, I only live 5 blocks away. I only live a few blocks away from here. And I think that realization is that all we know and how smart we are, it's seeing those things that you hear about is always a revelation.
Billy stayed day and night, made the arrest, saw the process, saw the drugs, helped in the seizure, went through the doors. We spoke to informants. Billy was with us. We went to court. Billy was with us. So that by the time Billy Friedkin was ready to make the French Connection about New York City detectives, Billy Friedkin was a New York City detective.
There were several scripts that Phil and I commissioned. The first script was written by a mutual friend of Phil's and mine named Alex Jacobs, who wrote Point Blank. And we didn't like it. Alex did a couple of drafts and we moved on. We then went to a writer named Rob Thompson. And Rob had written They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And we got a draft of the script from Rob, which we also didn't like. We were back in New York now, Phil and I was doing more research with Eddie and Sonny, and Phil came in one day and said he had just read the galleys of a novel called Shaft by a crime reporter for the New York Times named Ernest Tidyman, who had never written a screenplay.
Billy and I literally acted out, scene by scene, for Tidyman. And then Tidyman would leave at 1 o'clock and go off and write the pages we had all dictated. The next morning we would show up at 9 again, read the pages, make some corrections in it, and continue to the next scene. That went on for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then we ended up with the script.
I spent a lot of time with Tidyman, you know, and I believe that there were a lot of changes made, and but I believe the basis, the structure, and you know, the skeleton, the bones to put the meat on, came from Tidyman.
He gave us a draft of the script, again, based on just what Phil and I imparted to him about the story. And that script was not any good either, but it was very lean.
I feel like we shot what was in that script, and I thought that script was great. And the only name I ever saw in it was Ernest Tidyman.
I don't think there's a line in it or a word that Tidyman wrote. Certainly none of the dialogue. All of the dialogue came about from two areas. One, from Eddie and Sonny saying this is what we would say, this is what we did say, and my kind of transformation of that into something that was usable as dialogue.
I think there was considerable work, as I recall it, done on that script. But the basic core of the idea was there, and it just seemed to be a very tight, keenly worked out thriller with its roots in reality, and very exciting.
All of the scripts went around to every studio in Hollywood that passed on the film. So most of them passed twice.
Dick Zanuck and I instantly wanted to make this movie based on Ernest Tidyman's script, Billy Friedkin, and my recollection is we were both in New York at that time, Zanuck and I.
Phil and I were sitting in front of his desk, and he said, I got $1.5 million hidden away in a drawer over here, and if you guys can make this film for that, go ahead. He said, I don't really know what the hell it is. I just have a hunch.
I had a feeling about Billy. Billy had a great understanding of this subject. He had a vision when he came into that office that day, and I felt it. And I felt that he could get performances out of practically unknowns.
They thought we were going to say, we want superstars. And Dick Zanuck said, you know, this is a picture based in reality. It's based on an actual case.
And I said, I don't think we should make it with anyone. I think it should be very realistic, and I could see them give a sigh of relief when they heard that.
This was music to my ears, because we were primed that we had to go in and convince Zanuck that we could go out and get name actors to be in this thing, and that he would only do it with stars, and the opposite was true.
We were thinking about Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider playing the leads, and Zanuck said, great, and they were flabbergasted.
When Gene's name came up, I had just seen one of his films, and I thought this guy could really do it.
I instantly thought it was a bad idea, and but Zanuck said, look, you ought to meet with this guy. And we met, Phil and I had lunch with him at the Plaza Hotel at the Oak Room in New York.
So I went in and I had lunch with him, and it was a great lunch, and Billy is a very funny, wonderful, socially adept gentleman.
And I almost fell asleep at the lunch. You know, I really found it boring.
I had seen Gene Hackman, I never sang for my father. Handlebar mustache and like a twang in his voice. And it was one of the few times, again, I said to Billy, you're kidding me. No way.
I'll never forget meeting Hackman and seeing a little excerpt from I Never Sang for My Father. And I said, this guy's going to play Egan? My God.
Yeah, I think Eddie actually had wanted Rod Taylor in the film to play him. He thought he looked like Rod Taylor.
If we didn't go with Hackman, we really had nobody in the bullpen. We had nobody to say, well, if it's not Hackman, it's this person. Hackman was the guy, and we just had to go with him, and I felt it was right. He's a sensational actor, and this calls for a character actor, which is what Gene is, essentially.
I was not going to approve Gene Hackman, and Phil said, we have to, or we're going to lose the movie. I said, Phil, you want to do this with Hackman? I don't believe in it, but I'll do it with you. We'll give it our best shot.
I was lucky enough, I fell into a kind of a category where I was somewhat unknown to an audience, but I was known in the business, in the industry. So I kind of satisfied a kind of a happy medium for the studio.
Phil introduced me to this guy that he knew who was a character around New York named Bob Weiner. And I agreed to let Bob Weiner be the casting director. And one of the first things he did was he brought to my office up at Fox in New York a guy named Roy Scheider. He had just finished an appearance in an off-Broadway production of, I believe, Genet's The Balcony, where he was playing a cigar-smoking nun.
After we were introduced and sat down at the table, we began to talk about the case itself, how long it took, how much was involved, the money, and especially about the inter-police politics.
I said, you're the guy. You are. He didn't read for it. He didn't audition. I said, yeah, that's the guy. Get him. And when it came to casting Jahan, I remember saying to Weiner, hey, did you see that movie Belle de Jour? Yeah. I said, let's get that French guy that was in Belle de Jour. What the hell's his name? And he said, I'll find out. And he then went out and he called me a day or so later and he said, the guy's name is Fernando Rey, and he's available. I said, hire him, sign him. I went down to the airport to pick up Fernando Rey, who was just arriving. And I didn't see anyone I recognized, and I got paged, and I went over to the paging desk, and there's this guy standing there who I did in fact recognize, but he was clearly not the guy I was thinking of. He had this little goatee, and he had an aristocratic manner about him, and I remember thinking, what is this? Oh, he says, hello, I am Fernando Rey. He says, you know, I'm not French, I'm Spanish. I didn't know that. And he said, you know, my French is not very good either. I didn't know that. And I realized that he was not the guy in Belle de Jour either.
None.
I got him to his hotel and got him checked in, and I went to the phone in the lobby, and I called D'Antoni and Weiner, who were at our production office at Fox on the west side of Manhattan, and I said, you assholes, you fucking morons. I said, this is the wrong guy. I said, what? I said, this isn't the guy. He said, what do you mean? I said, that's not the guy in Belle de Jour. So, against my better judgment, I now had as the two leads of this picture, two people that I wasn't crazy about, that I thought were wrong for the part, both of them.
Bitch!
Friedkin's vision of New York was to be the dark street-level underbelly of that skyscraping fun city so often romanticized in the movies. Along with location manager Fat Thomas Rand, he plotted a course through what Life magazine called the jungle of the city to its grungy heart of darkness, from the streets of Manhattan and Brooklyn to the desolate wastelands of Ward's and Randall's Island.
I think it's New York, as New York is. Those locations that they don't advertise. And I think you get down and you see the underground of New York. You see the reality of what is there.
It's the dark side. It's the side that the cops see. It's the side that the gangsters see. It's the side that Billy is most familiar with.
It was exactly what I wanted. It was tough, it was gritty, it was grainy, it was realistic. It was New York, we were there, and it was fabulous. And the other pictures looked like movies. This looked like the real thing.
It's a movie about a garbage truck at dawn. It's a movie about seagulls in the distance. It's a movie about endless squealing tires and people yelling and screaming, get out of the way, banging on the sides of their cars.
We're all familiar with the glamorous Fifth Avenue, New York. We're not at all familiar with the underbelly, the base of the Brooklyn Bridge, the Cropsey Avenue L tracks in Brooklyn, the Randall's Island Bakery. This was very definitely a conscious effort on Billy's part to bring the audience into parts of New York that they were totally unfamiliar with.
We went to some bars on the lower west side of Manhattan, dingy places that stay open all night. They look like a bad set for The Iceman Cometh.
All right, Popeye's here.
I think we shot 100 locations in 86 days of shooting, or something like that. And it was in the winter, and it was very cold.
That whole winter was brutally cold. I mean, brutally. There were days where we would go out to shoot certain sequences that required some special effects, and we couldn't shoot them because the effects wouldn't work. It was too cold.
Every day on that film was cold. It was one day colder than the next. I mean, you can imagine shooting that film in January in New York and Brooklyn and lower Manhattan was murder.
It was so cold sometimes that no matter what you did, you just couldn't stop the cameras from freezing up.
The crew had to literally go inside to a store between shots. They could not stand outside and reload or reset for the next shot. They had to take a break between shots.
Jimmy, watch it. He's got a knife. Howdy, watch it. Hold him up.
My concept for The French Connection was induced documentary. That means make it look like the camera just happened on the scene, not like anything was set up. And in order to do that, from time to time, I would not rehearse the actors and the camera crew together. I rehearsed them separately.
Much of what we were doing was improvised, and it was improvised right on the floor. I mean, it came out of situations that required improvisation.
Will you stop it? Stop it! Come on.
Billy encouraged Gene and I to improvise and to do as much possible to develop our characters. And a lot of the dialogue in the film is just Gene and I sitting around, you know, having a good time talking about these bent noses we're following around here.
You got a friend here, buddy. You got a friend. You gonna tell us who your man is? When's the last time you picked your feet, Willie?
I asked Eddie what the genesis of picking your feet in Poughkeepsie was.
You ever been to Poughkeepsie? Huh?
He said, well, I'll show you. So we run around the block 3 or 4 times. We find a kid walking along the street, and he says, hey, you, get over here.
And Sonny Grasso would ask the guy some legitimate question about who's your connection, where is he?
He gets the kid in there. He says, you're the guy.
And he'd say your name, your address, how old are you? You're married, give me a date of birth, and he'd say, do you pick your feet?
And the kid said, what?
You were sitting on the edge of the bed and you were picking your feet in Poughkeepsie, right?
Did you pick your feet in Poughkeepsie?
Did you ever pick your feet in Poughkeepsie? And the guy would say, huh? What?
Poughkeepsie.
Did you ever sit down on the edge of the bed, take off your shoes and socks, and put your fingers between your toes?
And they'd say, well, I don't remember. And he said, because I know there was a guy who raped a girl in Poughkeepsie, and after he raped her, he sat on the edge of the bed and he picked his feet.
You sat on the edge of the bed, didn't you? You took off your shoes, put your finger between your toes, and picked your feet, didn't you? That's it! Yes!
Yeah, that was the thing Eddie used to do. It used to drive me crazy. And when Billy wanted to do it in the movie, I prayed to God, tried to talk him out of it.
Now, I'm gonna bust your ass for those 3 bags, and I'm gonna nail you for picking your feet in Poughkeepsie.
These 2 cops instinctively knew how to break a guy down with interrogation methods that just played with his mind. And so that's where pick your feet and Poughkeepsie comes from. It's a total non sequitur because the town of Poughkeepsie, New York, lends itself to the alliteration of pick your feet in Poughkeepsie. It means nothing.
You still picking your feet in Poughkeepsie?
Just as Egan and Grosso had experienced the grinding tension of life on the streets, so Friedkin wanted to get his cast as ragged and rattled as the characters they portrayed. And it was in pursuit of that raw edginess that he employed sometimes confrontational techniques to turn a mild-mannered Midwesterner like Gene Hackman into a tough, streetwise New Yorker.
Billy is a multifaceted director. He's a very complex human being.
He's great. He's brilliant. His intellect shines. And he's, in the best sense of the word, difficult.
He's honest. He's dishonest. He tells you what you want to hear. He's very clever psychologically, very instinctive about who you are and who he might be at that moment, or what he has to be at that moment.
Billy gets volatile, and that's fine, as long as it's creative and productive for the movie. He would get actors to be angry at each other and do all kinds of tormenting things to actors to get a response.
There's a very dark side to Billy. As you say, it's very nihilistic. It's cold. It allows no sentiment. And sometimes, my feeling is that that's not necessarily an asset in his work. In other words, his work sometimes gets unbalanced, and we get the dark side of the dark side of the dark side of the dark side.
You better come up with a scratch. I got a man waiting downstairs.
I think Billy gets performances out of actors with a technique that maybe other directors would not use. But he goes right to the nitty-gritty. Whatever is needed to get a performance out of that actor, and not all of them appreciate it.
Do you believe all this crap?
I go with my partner.
What'll it take?
Hackman and Egan didn't get along too well. I had Egan on the set for almost everything we shot. And at first, Sonny and Eddie thought that Hackman just wasn't getting it right, that he didn't really have a cop's heart.
Eddie Egan was a very, very tough guy, and I thought sometimes insensitive. He was distracting to me sometimes because him not being an actor, he didn't understand that sometimes you can't play everything 100% mean.
You wasted 2 months on this. No collars are coming in while you two guys are running around town jerking off. Now go back to work. You're off special assignment.
I think at one point, Hackman became disenchanted with Egan. Not because of what he is as a policeman, but what he was as a human being.
Gene did not want to go there. He wanted the part, he wanted to do it, but I have to say honestly that he was never prepared to commit 100% to the kind of racist, you'd have to say, it wouldn't be my word, but Eddie would be characterized today as a racist cop.
You dumb guinea. How the hell did I know he had a knife?
I had talked to him about some of the racist dialogue, and he wouldn't hear it. He wouldn't hear of it. He said that's the way it is, and that's what we have to do. So I just had to kind of suck it up and do the dialogue.
Never trust a nigger. He could have been white. Never trust anyone.
After a while, Hackman became, I think, a little concerned about Eddie's demeanor, and started to wonder how much of this is going to rub off on me, you know what I mean?
Who's the best fighter you ever seen, Doyle? Willie Mays. Willie Mays. What a baseball bat. One swing and kick your fucking head off.
Gene kept trying to find a way to make the guy human, to give the guy 3 dimensions that an actor of Gene's ability can fill out. And Billy kept saying, no, he's a son of a bitch. He's no good. He's a prick. He's all these things. And Gene, you know, thought, my God.
Billy and Gene really were at each other's throats throughout the whole course of the picture. I was aware of it because it was often difficult for me to get Gene to come out of the trailer. You know, he'd have some problem with a line or some problem with Billy.
What I did was I decided to make myself his antagonist. And I had to light a fire under him every day, if not hour by hour, and get him crazy.
Oh, I'm going to check on this address in the Bronx, and if they don't know you, they're at your ass.
There was one particular shot where we were standing outside of a restaurant where they're supposedly on surveillance while the French guy is inside, and they're outside eating frozen pizza and cold coffee. And the day we shot this, it was literally below zero weather in New York.
Billy wanted to do a close-up of Gene's hands showing the cold. And he showed him what he wanted to do. He said, I want to, you know, do the shot and, you know, make your hands look like it's really cold and everything.
And we did 6, 7 takes, and I used to antagonize him. And finally I said, what in the fuck are you doing?
You could see that Gene was offended by that, and so he started to put Billy on a little bit, and he said, show me that again, would you? Because he said, I didn't quite get that.
He was saying, you know, come on, more, I want to see more.
It's fucking cold out here. All you have to do is show me how cold you are. Don't act, just show me how cold you are.
So he did it again. And Billy didn't know at this time what Gene was up to, and I started to see it, and then, so we did a take, and Billy's cut, no, that's not what I want.
And he said to me, in that tone of voice, why don't you step in front of the camera and show me exactly what you want me to do? I mean, exactly.
And he was trying to say, in no uncertain terms, don't show me what to do, just tell me what you want. You want me to be cold? I'll be cold.
And I stood in front of the camera, and I did this for him, and I said, this is exactly what I want you to do.
Then Billy finally got it.
Great, cut. And he walked off the set for the rest of the day.
You want the red or the white? Port in your ear.
For all its downbeat air of gritty realism, The French Connection first earned audience popularity as much for its white-knuckle chase sequence, which was promptly hailed as the best on screen. Producer Phil D'Antoni had previously set the benchmark with Bullitt, and he was keen to repeat that success. But there was no chase in the French Connection script, and Friedkin didn't want to do anything that had been done before. And so the two of them cooked up the idea of topping Steve McQueen's car chasing a car by having Gene Hackman's car chasing an L train.
The first thing that occurred to me was I had to do a chase where there were innocent people all over the streets. I knew it had to be completely different from Bullitt, which had only preceded it by 3 or 4 years and was still very much in memory. It had to be a damn good one, because you were going against Bullitt, and it had to be different.
Nothing has been as real as that chase, or as exciting. I think that put them all away, as far as I'm concerned.
Police emergency, I need your car.
The very first production meeting we had, Phil got up and made a speech. And he said, I just finished a picture that had probably the greatest chase ever done. He said, my mandate to all of you is that this film has a better chase than Bullitt.
I didn't even have the idea. And we used to put it off, D'Antoni and I. And one day we said, as we were approaching production, we said, let's take a walk in New York and let's just talk and see if we can spitball a chase scene. And I remember we walked for about 55 blocks. And meanwhile, the subways were rumbling underneath us, and we were seeing all these people filling the streets.
We finally got to 3rd Avenue, and I was starting to talk about the 3rd Avenue L. Having been a New Yorker all my life, I remember the L, we reminisced about the L. And it was at that point that the idea crossed my mind that we might possibly use the L
I don't remember how, but gradually, in just talking, the idea started to hatch itself of a car chasing a train.
In 1970, we didn't have any of the technology we have available today, so everything you see in that chase scene on film is stuff that we shot.
They used no control at all. They just took a siren, slapped it on top of the car, and Hickman took off with the 3 cameras running.
We ran free. In other words, nobody was blocking anything for us. Nobody planned anything.
Running lights, narrowly missing people, cars, things like that. And that was all live. So that myth is not a myth. It's true.
Along the way, it was all improvisation. It was stuff like, can we shoot on that street over there? Well, I don't think so. We got to talk to 500 store owners. Fuck it, let's just shoot over there. Okay, let's go.
I was upset. He knew I was upset. I said, you know, it's dangerous, it's absolutely wrong, and you know, I think it's terrible to do that.
That may be. I mean, it was a terrible thing to do. It was very dangerous, and it was life-threatening.
The car was totally stripped down, and Bill Hickman was the driver. I sat in the passenger side. I was wrapped in a mattress, and Billy Friedkin was in the back, and he was on the camera.
Bill Hickman, bless his soul, he did the chase and bullet. I think that gave Billy reason to think that he would probably be just right for the French Connection chase.
Hickman was one of those very, very tense, show-offy, egotistical kind of guys. I can do anything, you know, and he would endanger anyone also.
Bill took up the challenge. He said, you want to see some hairy driving? I said, yeah. He said, you got the balls to get in my car? I'll show you some fucking driving.
Prior to getting into the car, Billy spoke to Bill Hickman in the following manner. We're only going to be able to do this once. We're not protected. We're lucky if we come out of this thing without being arrested. We're going to steal this shot. So you got to give it to me. You really got to give it to me.
I think we started in Coney Island at around Bay 50th Street, and he drove through, my memory is 26 blocks of traffic with no control. And he kept his foot on the gas except when he had to brake, and he was going at speeds of 90 miles an hour.
He weaved. We went on the sidewalk once. We faced the oncoming traffic once. During the ride, we careened or creased a city bus so that the doors would not open. Billy kept saying to Bill Hickman, give it to me, only once, we're doing it. This is fucking great, do it. And Bill Hickman responded.
There were accidents that occurred during the chase that were not supposed to happen. There was one I remember vividly because it really was a scary accident. We thought that perhaps someone might have gotten hurt.
They were shooting a second unit shot of Hackman driving the car underneath the L, and we had our second unit camera in the trunk of the other car, which Hickman was driving.
And they wanted a real high-speed sequence where these pillars were kind of strobing past the car. What they hadn't counted on was somebody coming out of their house, getting in their car and driving into our shot. And that actually happened. Suddenly, I see this blur, and a guy pulls right in front of me, and he wants to turn left. And I don't know how fast I was going, as fast as the car would go in the 3-block period. And I hit him, and then it put me right into a pillar. Bam!
The cameraman got thrown to the floor of the trunk from the force of the whole thing. And fortunately, Hackman wasn't hurt, or at least he wasn't hurt bad, and the cameraman wasn't hurt bad, nobody was hurt, and it was just pure luck, because that could have been a very scary situation.
I remember that Billy always wanted more of that stuff in there, and certainly played against Gene Hackman's face and all of the frustration that Hackman was able to evoke. And, you know, probably Billy was right. More is more.
We are where the chase ends, where Gene finally catches the train. The car stops downstairs, and Gene stumbles around to the bottom of the stairs. There's a confrontation. Gene leans against the rail with his gun, and the Frenchman faces him, turns to leave, and Gene shoots him. Well, during the rehearsal, which I saw, I was across the street. I come running over to Billy Friedkin, and how presumptuous of me, I say, "You can't do that." "Can't do what?" I said, "You can't do that. You have a New York City detective whom I know, and you have him shooting somebody in the back, and this somebody is unarmed. That's murder. You can't do this." Fast forward 6, 7, 8 months, we're in a theater in Manhattan. There must be 1,000 people in the audience. And we come to that particular scene, and I'm saying to myself, watch. And just before Gene shoots him, there's that moment of silence of where you can hear everything. And then Gene shoots him. 1,000 people in the audience stand up screaming, cheering. Billy runs up, and he said, "It works for them, so it's got to work for me, so it should work for you." Not only that, that turns out to be the poster shot of the French Connection.
This is the dog end of Ward's Island, where the French Connection's final shootout takes place, ending with that single enigmatic retort. In order to up the ante and leave the audience feeling that they genuinely witnessed something real, Friedkin decided to block the actors and then allow DP Owen Roisman and his operator to grab one camera apiece and shoot the action ad hoc, as if they were news reporters arriving at the scene of a crime.
I decided to end the movie with a bang. The movie was clearly going to end with Hackman running away down this long corridor at this abandoned warehouse, having not been able to find Charnier. But by that time, he had, in my mind, gone over the edge.
The son of a bitch is here. I saw it. I'm gonna get him.
We were running around in the slop, in the mud, and chasing the Frenchman through that labyrinthian place. And I can't explain the ending to the movie to you. And Billy doesn't even bother to try.
You hear a gunshot. And people have asked me through the years what that meant. It doesn't mean anything, although it might.
The gunshot is a marvelous, marvelous afterthought. And we don't see that too often in American movies, because American movies are always very uplifting and they tell us how to feel, and that moment confuses us hopelessly. We don't know what happened. What did he do? What does it mean?
It might mean that this guy is so over the top at that point that he's shooting at shadows.
The gunshot was very, very important because it gave kind of a third dimension to the whole ending, to the whole film. It just, the enigma.
I can't say that I knew certainly that it was going to be a Academy Award, five Academy Award film, but I must say that when I was working on it and saw the dailies, I knew something was up here. I knew there was something very, very special about what I was seeing from day to day.
I can remember one day going to dailies at the Fox studio in New York, 54th Street, and sitting in the back of the Fox screening room was Darryl Zanuck, who was running the studio at that time. And it was the dailies where Popeye Doyle is asking the guy if he picks his feet in Poughkeepsie. And I hear this coughing from the back of the room, and it's obviously Mr. Zanuck. You know, he doesn't know what's going on with these dailies. And it occurred to me that, you know, that Fox really just didn't know. They just didn't have a clue what they were getting out of this French Connection movie.
We're very close to the final editing when their advertising promotion department sent me a memo saying, we've decided to change the title, The French Connection, to one of these 4 or 5 choices. I think one was Doyle. One was Popeye.
The studio thought the title was abominable. What is the French Connection? Is it a perfume store in Paris? I mean, it almost sounds effete. The French Connection?
We were having a very bad period, even though we had made some excellent pictures during this process. And there was a lot of friction between my father and myself during that period. And so the board decided to call it a day on both of us.
We left behind The French Connection, which I believe was in post-production. And as a matter of fact, we who caused The French Connection to be produced were denied the opportunity to see it except to pay our money at the box office.
I remember going to the press screening, the last press screening. And the press, who especially in those days, they were so sedate, they were so controlled, you know. And at the end of that film, they were up, they were applauding, they were yelling and screaming like adolescents.
When I first saw the first presentation of the film, I called Gene Hackman, who was in California at the time, and he hadn't seen the film yet. I said to him, Gene, you are going to win an Academy Award for this performance. And I was that impressed with it. I knew right away that this was a great film.
Just as the 1962 bust had made unlikely heroes of Egan and Grosso, so the success of The French Connection established William Friedkin as Hollywood's Dark Prince. From here, he would go on to court outrage and acclaim in pretty much equal measures with films like The Exorcist, lensed by Owen Roizman, Sorcerer, a savage remake of Wages of Fear starring Roy Scheider, and of course Cruising, in which he re-teamed with Sonny Grosso and Randy Jurgensen to take his most controversial voyage into the dark netherworld of undercover police work. It was a film which again blurred the line between cops and criminals, heroes and villains, a theme which recurs throughout Friedkin's work, from documentaries like The Thin Blue Line to glossy thrillers like To Live and Die in LA, but which first burst onto the streets in The French Connection.
It was a little classic. Oscar, forget about it. No, I never entered into our minds, or certainly not mine.
When we wrapped the picture on the last day of shooting, Phil said to me, what do you think? And I said, Phil, I think we're going to be all right with this. I think I'll get away with it. But we're not going to win any Academy Awards. I'll tell you that.